What did I even put myself through? Like, animated wise, how do I go from the absolute magical 2D spectacle masterpiece that's the Owl House, which houses two of my favorite Disney characters of all time, to this? I am definitely not the first person to say that the Nitrogen era was the worst thing to happen to the original series of Thomas, nor will I ever be the last. From its awful dialogue, to the characters being written badly, to the constant three strikes formula being in every single solitary episode, it is just pure dog shit. While I don't think it is the worst thing that's happened to Thomas, that only goes to All Engines Go by a long shot, it's still an example of how not to treat Thomas. But there are some diamonds in the rough. Like, the animation by Nitrogen Studios is, at the very least, still good quality in a lot of areas. I really enjoy the movies, the only thing I like to rewatch from time to time. Yes, even Vestiaire Rescue, don't hate me for this. And there are even some good episodes in this lot. But there are a lot of stinkers. And that's where this episode steps in, as I'm going to be counting down my picks for the worst episodes in the Nitrogen era. I would have done a top 20 if I could, but these 10 episodes are so awful that they deserve to be listed on their own. So, let's get this shit show underway, shall we? Kicking up the list is Pop Goes Thomas. We're not off to a good start now, are we? For starters, how in the mother of Titan does Thomas, his driver, or his fireman not know what that popping noise is? Also, lemonade being carried by train? Really? Like, this whole situation wouldn't have happened if they just covered the fucking lemonade up. Or if Thomas wasn't such a brain-dead idiot. And to think we're only getting started with these. Coming in at number 9 is Buzzy Bees. Sure, seeing Hero in this episode was nice, but why do you have to make this all about Buzzy Bees? Oh, but there was one episode about bees in season 3, and there wasn't a problem there. Yes, that's true. But the thing is, that episode was 4.5 minutes long, and it was pretty amusing seeing all the strategics James tried to do to try and get the bees off his boiler. And, objectively, it was actually a great episode. Whereas this episode is nearly double the runtime of the classic era, and Thomas is yet again a complete idiot. Not much to say other than it's trash. Next is the first of the truly awful episodes, James to the Rescue. I bet you all know why this was on here, because of James's stupid line he says to Toby.
Toby, Sodor rescue engines are steam engines. You are a steam tram. Steam trams can't be rescue engines.
Okay, so James is now prejudiced against steam trams like Toby? What in the fuck did they do to these characters in this era? And why didn't Toby just fetch Rocky straight away if he knew that this big red dipshit was going to make things worse? Good lord, and we're not even done with the worst of it yet. Next is Race to the Rescue from Season 16. Now, Season 16 is definitely the least awful of this era, but it's still not without sin. Like, why didn't the Fat Controller ask Flynn to fight the fire on the rails? Like, The barn that's set on fire in this episode is the same shed that was set on fire in Dare the Diesels, and they'll put it out on the rails. Also, the bits with Flynn not getting used to being on the roads just had my head banging for most of the episode. Dear Lord, this episode. Next is Henry's Magic Box, which, interestingly, would have been the last episode that Piers Brosnan would have narrated if he stuck around until this season. But honestly, I'm glad he didn't stick around for this era, as I wouldn't have even dared him narrating this god-awful episode. Like, how in the fuck could all of those trees have fitted in that one single box, folded up or otherwise? But also, why couldn't the Fat Controller tell the other engines to come to McColl's farm at tea time? The biggest president of all had the same problem, but at least it was tolerable, as bad as that episode is. And Henry was just looking after that box as if it was like his palisman or something. God, imagine a palisman that's a box. That would just be cringe. Kicking up the top 5 is Thomas and the Snowman Party. I am still baffled that this was approved by HIT, as this has one of, if not the worst moral to teach kids in the whole show. Yes, even more than Apology Impossible's moral. And I'll get to that soon enough. Basically, Thomas just goes around the island and steals people's hats. What kind of a lesson is that to teach the kids? They would want to do the same thing Thomas did in this episode, and that's not a good thing. If it was Billy, then I would understand. But Thomas, of all characters? No. I can't with this more of this. Next one. In 4th place is Up, Up and Away. Everyone and their grandma has talked endlessly about why this episode is awful and nonsensical. The concept of a giant balloon on a flatbed is just ridiculous. And how in the fuck did Mr. Bubbles have that much breath to blow 3 whole giant balloons up in just a short amount of time? Do air pumps not exist in the Thomas universe? This episode was so awful that Andrew Brenner had the right to poke fun at it in season 21's Dowager Hat's Busy Day. Fuck this episode big time. In 3rd place is the episode almost everyone universally considers as the worst Thomas episode, Wonky Whistle. Again, this episode has been talked about to death, so I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. Thomas is an idiot, the sound of the wonky whistle is annoying, and the rhyming and alliteration is at its absolute worst in this one. I would have put this as number 1 if I could, but there are 2 more that I think are even worse than Wonky Whistle. In 2nd place is Fiery Flynn. I'm sorry, but how in the world is Flynn this dumb? Like, in Dare the Diesels, and the seasons to come for that matter, he was shown to be a real hero. But this episode portrays him at his absolute worst. Like, he should know what actual fire looks like. All he needed to do was look in the sky and see where the smoke is coming from. Simple! But he just looks so retarded at his job when he sprays water in Edward and Gordon. Oh yeah, and there is also, quite possibly, the worst thing I have ever heard in a TV show. I present to you all...
The blue engine was Thomas. His firebox was on fire.
I'm sorry, but firebox on fire? It's called a fucking firebox! Of course it's meant to be on fire! That's what it does! This episode is just awful, but nothing compared to my number 1 pick. My pick for the absolute worst episode in the Nitrogen era, and my personal pick for my most hated episode in the whole show, in fact, is James in the Dark. If you've all seen my season 14 review, you all know how much I despise this episode. Like, how in the holy mother of fuck can James not make out Thomas and Edward in the dark? It makes even less sense since now they have individual voices. How is James this dumb? This episode is absolutely atrocious, and is, in my opinion, the worst Nitrogen episode, and my pick from the worst episode in the whole fucking show. Fuck this episode! You know, for as awful as the Nitrogen era is, at least it still feels like how Thomas used to be. From its unique camera angles, to the renders of the engines, to the storybook setting of the first 5 seasons. And hey, at least we had better writing when Andrew Redder, Ian McHugh, and others came on board for the Renaissance era. For the most part. And that's where the next video is going to come in. And at least I won't be ranting as much in the next 2 videos as I was for this one and the worst hit era episodes video. But still gotta do what I gotta do.